Today we take a look at Queendomino, which is the sequel to and a slightly more advanced version of Kingdomino. That is a game that we played a couple of months ago and we liked it very much, both my daughters and I, and so we wanted to try this new version here that seems to have to do with a queen. Now, the basic idea, the basic engine in Queendomino remains the same as the one that you're probably familiar with from Kingdomino. Each player has 1 or 2 kings, depending on number of players. Each turn there will be 4 terrain tiles available, and they're numbered on the back, as you can see, and you place them in ascending order from top to bottom. Basically, each round you will have your king on one of these tiles. The tiles are resolved from top to bottom. Say there was a player that reserved that tile, they go and resolve it. Now it's my turn, I take my king, I resolve the tile, I place it in my kingdom, and I also choose where I want to place my king for the next turn. Then the tiles are resolved, and we continue like this. We slide these things, and the basic idea is that each turn you decide where you want to place your next one, and the twist, the interesting thing, is that also means that you decide when you want to go in a turn, if you want to go earlier or later. The basic idea, again, like in the original Kingdomino, is that when you get a tile, you can attach it to your initial area with a castle, and then any new tile must either touch the initial tile, like so, or it must at least touch orthogonally an area that has the same terrain of the square that you're attaching it to. So this would be legal because they're touching. This would be super legal because both squares are touching a terrain of the same type, but it's not necessarily that both would touch. This would be legal because you have one terrain of the same type that touches. This would be illegal. I think you got the idea. You're trying to build a square of 5 by 5, if it's 2 players, of 7 by 7, and at the end of the game you will score that. You will score what you have on your tile and a couple of other things. The twist is that between when you take your tile and you place it and when you reserve your position for the next turn, you may do a couple of things. We have new resources. We have towers that you can collect, knights or paladins. They look really cute. Also, they're pretty small, and since I have a dark table, they tend to disappear a little bit, but that's my problem, not the game. Then we have this board here that has a scary dragon that goes on it, and then we have a large stack of tiles that represent different buildings that the players may build during the game. On the top left area, you have an indication of resources that you collect immediately. So, for example, I will collect a knight and a tower, and I place them in my play area. And in the bottom right, the tile tells you about extra ways to score that you will be able to activate at the end of the game. For example, if I had this building in my kingdom, I guess in my queendom, I'll score 2 victory points for each territory, not square, but each territory of that type. Here, I collect 2 knights when I build this building, and I have 3 victory points at the end of the game. 3 knights and 2 victory points. A tower right away, and then a victory point for each tower, and so on and so forth. So you will get to score different things on top of the same scoring that you know from Kingdomino. The cost to build a building is the one indicated under the position of the tile. When you build a tile, you place it in your kingdom, and the red terrain, which is a new type of terrain, is the construction site, and you need to have an open one. You cannot stack them one on top of the other. So that is the cost that you have to pay, and this is the other resource that we have now, money, yay! So that is good. At the end of the round, you slide down the the remaining buildings, and so that the price will decrease. There's always one building that can be built for free. So one thing that you can do optionally during your turn, if you have the money and the inclination and at least an open building site, you can build a building. Another thing that you can do is to send 1 or 2 knights, if you have them in your personal area, 1 or 2 knights to collect the taxes. To do so, you place a knight in a square of a tile that you just placed, and the knight taxes the territory of that type that touches that square that you just placed. In this case, the knight that I placed there would tax 2 squares of water. If I place it here, it would only tax 1. Not so fun. And if that later happens and I place 1 here, it taxes 2. Yeah, these are not great places to tax, but just to show how it works. This is the number of coins that you collect. So if I'm taxing there, I'm collecting 2 coins. If I'm taxing there, 2 coins. And those coins you use to, as we saw, to build the buildings. Also, each 3 coins that you still have at the end of the game equals 1 victory point. More ways of collecting victory points. Other things that you collect, again, is towers, and when you have the most towers in the game, the queen comes to visit you. Hooray! When the queen is visiting you, the cost to build new buildings is reduced by 1. Also, at the end of the game, the queen will count as a crown. That is, if you place her in a region, now the region has an extra crown. As you know, that is very important because at the end, each territory scores a number of points which is equal to the number of squares in the territory times the number of crowns. If the queen is there, those 2 tiles now are worth 6 points. 2 squares times 3 crowns. So very powerful idea, but it may be stolen from you if somebody has more towers than you. Also, the dragon, the scary dragon, another optional action is you can bribe the dragon, but only if the queen is not visiting your kingdom, because it would just be bad taste to be seen dealing with a dragon in front of the queen. That's just very distasteful. So you bribe the dragon, you give the dragon a coin, you spend a coin, and you send the dragon to destroy any one tile that you're afraid someone else is going to get. Also, the dragon only destroys 1 per game turn. So if I use this game turn, then the players cannot do it until we get to the next game turn. This is the general idea. You continue as usual until all tiles have been used. By then, players will have their little territory here, the little queendom. And at that point, you score it. Again, you score it based on territories, number of squares times the number of crowns in them. Plus, you look at each building and you see what that scores you. Plus, each 3 coins is equal a victory point. You put together all of the points from any possible source, and at the end, the player with the highest total is the winner of the game. So, Queen Domino, it's very similar to King Domino in a sense. I'm almost thinking, I don't know that I have much new to say. I have something to say, but compared to my review of King Domino, just go and watch the conclusions of that one. What I say there applies here, so I don't need to repeat myself too much. It has all of the advantages of the original King Domino. It is simple, it is linear, it has intuitive choices, but then that still matter, and you have almost 2 different games here, but that work together, 2 mini games. One is the domino proper, as you're preparing your puzzle, and the other one is trading pieces with opportunity. As I'm getting a piece that I really like this turn, but maybe it's towards the bottom of the line, so by reserving that the previous turn, I'm missing out the opportunity of getting something good the next turn. So the fact that you get some of the good stuff, which is at the higher numbers, you are going later in the turn, which sets you up for a worse situation the following turn, giving incidentally everyone the chance in alternating cycles of getting the good stuff that is towards the bottom. So there's 2 mini games, so exactly the same as in the original King Domino, but then here you have the extra elements. You have the queen, you have the dragon, You have the towers, the knights, and the buildings especially. And so that also means that each turn you have a couple of extra steps, or do you? It's not mandatory to use the buildings, like to concentrate your strategy heavily on them. If you ignore them at all, you're probably gonna lose, that is true. But it is possible to win without a building heavy strategy. There was a game where I was the player that by far had the least buildings in the kingdom, and I won by a little margin, but I still managed to win. So the turns in which you will actually be performing those extra phases are not every turn. You're not going to do it every turn, maybe just a couple of turns. Yet this is interesting to have that possibility of taxing your lands to get some coins, or spending your coins, etc., etc., to manipulate the position of the queen, because her visit is pretty good. The dragon, I'm not sure that it really adds much. I think maybe I used it once, and it was almost just to get it out there and see, and for fun. There are cases where, yeah, I see that you need a certain building tile and 2 copies of that building tile out there, so what is the point of spending resources to put the dragon to eliminate one and you get the other? And other times, yes, that tile, I know you like it, but then I'm leaving another tile which is almost as good. So because of that, and because there are really interesting things to analyze in your player area and in the tile selection area, I didn't feel that the dragon really added all that much, but it also did not detract from the experience. It's a nice little game piece, by the way. But Queen Domino, I really like what the buildings bring. If you in fact decide to emphasize that element in your strategy, then you have more flexibility, then you have more choices. The fact that the game can be played almost as original Queen Domino, or as a, I wouldn't say considerably heavier, meatier game, but definitely as a game with more depth, to me is a great advantage, because, well, the game has more flexible gameplay, and as it is in my experience, it is possible to win in multiple ways, embracing the buildings or ignoring them a little bit, or at least in a case not having a strategy that converges heavily on them. So you just have more flexible gameplay. The game may go in a larger range of different directions, and because of that, it is more enjoyable, it is more captivating. Now, somehow it is a game that is very simple to play, but I don't find it all that easy to teach. When I teach it to somebody, almost because it almost feels like in order to understand A, you need to understand B before, but to understand B, you need to understand A. Like, okay, I'm gonna tell you what happens next turn before I tell you what happens this turn. But before we really get there, let me tell you about this optional phase that may or may not happen. Somehow I haven't figured out a way that is perfectly linear to logical to teach the game. So I played with my daughter, with my daughter Amelia, who's 7, and although the game is a little more complex than King Domino, no problem at all. I played it with other friends that are more like casual gamers, and at the beginning, maybe because of my explanation, they felt a little confused, but once the game started, it really clicked. So even if you're planning to play with very casual gamers, maybe warn them just at the beginning that all the different bits and pieces may sound confusing as they explained, but the game is absolutely accessible. It's a gateway level, and once you enter that gateway, you're gonna have a lot of fun, because the game is still light, but it has more depth, it has more complexity, and more options, more gameplay options than the original King Domino. So I like King Domino, but Queen Domino definitely is the better of the two. Really fun and enjoyable game.